The call came at midnight, a time when the world is supposed to be asleep. But for us, it became the moment our world shattered into 1,000 panes of broken glass and screaming fear. I'm just a man who fell in love with a woman, bought a house in what we thought was a quiet suburban haven, and dreamed of raising our child surrounded by white picket fences and friendly neighbors. But those picket fences turned into a battleground, and the friendly neighbors were replaced by an HOA regime led by a woman named Brenda, a Karen of the highest order whose obsession with control would culminate in a hail of police bullets tearing through our nursery and striking my pregnant wife, Sarah. It all started with a simple disagreement over the height of our backyard hedge, a ridiculous rule buried deep in the HOA bylaws that Brenda enforced with the zeal of a military general. She claimed it blocked the aesthetic unity of the cul-de-sac, but I knew it was because I'd refused to vote for her during the last board election. The fines started small, $50 here, $100 there, but they escalated quickly when I, perhaps foolishly, dug my heels in. This was my property, my castle, and that hedge was planted by Sarah's grandfather. It was a living memory, not a zoning violation. The letters turned into threats of liens, and the threats turned into Brenda herself showing up on my doorstep, her face a mask of smug authority, telling me I was bringing down the entire neighborhood's property value. The night it happened, we were in the nursery, Sarah's hand guiding mine as we painted a soft, buttery yellow onto the walls. She was 7 months along, her belly a perfect, beautiful curve, and we were laughing, dreaming about whether the baby would have her eyes or my stubbornness. The scent of fresh paint and hope filled the room. Then the doorbell rang, not a friendly chime, but an insistent, angry buzz. I went downstairs, my hand leaving a faint smudge of yellow on the banister, and opened the door to find Brenda standing there, flanked by 2 uniformed police officers. Her eyes gleamed with triumph. "We've received multiple complaints," she announced, her voice dripping with faux concern. "Reports of a domestic disturbance. Screaming, sounds of a struggle. We're here to perform a welfare check." My blood ran cold. "A welfare check? You're insane, Brenda. We were painting. My wife is pregnant and upstairs resting. There was no disturbance." One of the officers, a young guy with a tired look, shifted his weight. "Sir, we just need to have a quick look around. Confirm everything is okay." "It's standard procedure." I stood my ground, my body blocking the doorway. "You do not have my consent to enter my home. This is a harassment campaign by this woman, and you are being used as her personal militia. I want your badge numbers, and I want you off my property." That's when Brenda played her masterstroke. She leaned forward, her voice a venomous whisper just loud enough for the officers to hear. "He's been erratic, officer. I'm worried he might have hurt his wife. I saw him earlier today, and he seemed volatile." The word volatile hung in the air, changing everything. The officers' posture stiffened, their casual procedure now morphing into a potential crisis. The tired-looking officer spoke again, his tone firmer. "Sir, step aside. We need to ensure the safety of your wife." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Sarah is fine. She's pregnant and doesn't need this stress. You cannot come in without a warrant." The argument escalated on the doorstep, my voice rising in frustrated fury, their voices becoming more commanding. I saw Brenda's smirk, a quick, fleeting thing she tried to hide, and I knew she had orchestrated this perfectly. She had weaponized the police, turning my righteous defiance into a perceived threat. From upstairs, I heard Sarah's frightened voice call down, "Alex! What's going on? Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine, honey." "Stay there!" I yelled back, my eyes locked on the officers. But it was too late. The sound of her voice, laced with fear, was all the justification they seemed to need. The second officer, older and with a harder edge, put his hand on his sidearm. "Sir, this is your last warning. Step aside, or you will be arrested." The standoff felt like it lasted an eternity. a bubble of tense silence in the humming suburban night. Then, a noise from the side of the house, a gate creaking open. Brenda, in her infinite and malicious wisdom, must have told them about the side gate leading to the backyard. The older officer started moving toward it, intending to peer through the windows. I instinctively moved to block him, my arms spread. "That is still my property. Do not go back there." It was chaos, shouting, accusations. The young officer grabbed my arm. I shook him off. In the struggle, my elbow bumped against the doorframe. From the perspective of a jumpy, misinformed cop, it must have looked like an assault. A shout of, "He's resisting!" echoed, and then the world exploded. Not with a single shot, but with a deafening volley. The front window of our living room shattered. The officers, having misread the chaotic tussle, had drawn their weapons and opened fire on my house, on my home, on my family. The sound was deafening, a thunderclap of violence that had no place on our quiet street. I dropped to the floor, my ears ringing, my heart screaming one name: Sarah! I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the shouts of the officers, the screaming of Brenda, and I ran. I took the stairs two at a time. My world narrowed to the hallway leading to the nursery. The door was ajar. I pushed it open. The room, once a sanctuary of future dreams, was a nightmare. Moonlight streamed through a new, jagged hole in the wall, where a bullet had torn through. Specks of plaster dust floated in the air like evil snow. And there, on the floor, amidst the drops of yellow paint, was my wife. Sarah was curled on her side, one hand clutching her swollen belly, the other pressed against her shoulder. A dark, terrifying stain was spreading across the fabric of her maternity shirt. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a shock so profound it stole the air from my lungs. Her lips moved, a whisper I had to crawl to hear. "Alex! The baby. It hurts." The police had opened fire on my house, and a stray bullet, meant for a phantom threat, had found my pregnant wife. The world went silent then, the ringing in my ears replaced by a cold, focused roar. I looked from Sarah's pain-glazed eyes to the broken window, and down to the street, where I could hear Brenda's hysterical sobs. In that moment, my fear crystallized into something else, something hard and unyielding. This was no longer about a hedge. This was a war, and Brenda and the cops who did her bidding had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. They had no idea who they were truly dealing with, or the storm of vengeance that was about to be unleashed. The next hours were a blur of sirens, sterile white light, and the metallic smell of fear that clung to the inside of my nostrils. Paramedics swarmed our violated nursery, their professional calm a stark contrast to the primal terror coursing through me. I held Sarah's hand, my fingers tight around hers, whispering promises I wasn't sure I could keep. "Stay with me. You're strong. Our baby is strong. Just stay with me." My gaze kept drifting to the blood on the floor, a dark, accusing pool mingling with the cheerful yellow paint. In the chaos, I saw Brenda being led away by another arriving police unit, her face a mess of tears and shock, but all I felt was a cold, detached fury. At the hospital, it was a different kind of battle. Doctors and nurses rushed Sarah into surgery. The words bullet wound, placental abruption, and emergency C-section hitting me like physical blows. I was left alone in the harsh, humming silence of a waiting room, my clothes still dusted with plaster and speckled with my wife's blood. A detective arrived, his demeanor cautiously sympathetic, but I saw the calculation in his eyes. He was trying to piece together the official narrative, and I knew, with a chilling certainty, that the involved officers and Brenda would already be weaving a story where I was the aggressor, the unstable homeowner who provoked a tragic accident. I gave him a bare-bones statement, my voice flat, my lawyer's mind, honed from years of practicing civil law, already clicking into gear beneath the surface of my grief. "My name is Alex. This is my address. My pregnant wife, Sarah, was inside our home when officers responding to a maliciously false report filed by HOA Board President Brenda opened fire on our house without justification. A bullet struck my wife. She is now in life-saving surgery. I will provide a full statement through my attorney. Until then, I have nothing more to say. I then called the one person who could handle this storm, my law partner and pit bull litigator, Marcus. "Marcus," I said, the word cracking. "They shot Sarah at the house. The baby—" I didn't need to say more. "I'm on my way," he replied, his voice a low growl of instant readiness. "Don't talk to anyone. I'm calling a press conference for the morning." When Marcus arrived, the dynamic shifted. He handled the police. He handled the growing crowd of reporters already sniffing around the story, and he made sure I was left alone to face the most agonizing weight of my life. Finally, a weary-looking surgeon emerged. "Mr. Reynolds, your wife is out of surgery. The bullet passed through her shoulder, a clean wound, but the trauma and the shock. It caused a significant placental abruption. We had to perform an emergency cesarean." He paused, and my heart stopped. "Your daughter is here. She's very small, just over 3 pounds. She's in the NICU, and it's going to be a fight. But she's a fighter. Your wife is stable but sedated. They're both critical, but alive. A daughter." I had a daughter. The wave of relief was so immense it buckled my knees, but it was immediately followed by a fresh wave of rage. They had stolen this moment. They had turned the birth of my child into a trauma. I saw her then, through the glass of the NICU, a tiny, impossibly fragile being lost in a tangle of wires and tubes. Her skin almost translucent. Her little chest fluttered like a captured bird. Her name would be Ilara, after Sarah's grandmother, a woman known for her gentle strength. And I swore to her right there that I would burn their world to the ground for what they had done to her and her mother. The war was no longer a metaphor. The following days were a whirlwind of strategy. From Sarah's hospital room, which became our command center, Marcus and I worked. We filed a massive civil rights lawsuit against the police department, the individual officers, and the HOA, naming Brenda personally for her role in instigating the negligent and reckless operation. But that was just the financial blow. We wanted justice. We went to the media, but we did it smartly. We granted an exclusive interview to a respected investigative journalist, giving her the human story. The photos of the painted nursery, the ultrasound image of Ilara, a picture of Sarah, radiant and pregnant, just days before the shooting. We laid bare the entire history of Brenda's harassment, the fabricated fines, the power trips. I presented not as an angry man, but as a devastated husband and father, a professional who had tried to follow the rules and was met with catastrophic force. The public outcry was immediate and deafening. The narrative of a rogue HOA Karen and trigger-happy cops went viral. Meanwhile, our own investigation uncovered gold. A deep dive into the HOA's financial records, which we subpoenaed, revealed that Brenda had been embezzling funds for years, using HOA money for personal vacations, a new swimming pool, and luxury goods. She wasn't just a bully. She was a criminal who used her petty authority to cover her tracks and intimidate anyone who asked questions. The criminal case against the officers also gained momentum. The police department's own internal investigation, under intense public scrutiny, found that the officers had violated multiple use-of-force protocols. They had acted on an uncorroborated claim from a known vindictive source and had escalated a nonviolent situation into a deadly force scenario with catastrophic negligence. The climax came not in a single moment, but in a series of satisfying falls. Brenda was the first to break. Facing a mountain of evidence for embezzlement and a separate charge of filing a false police report leading to bodily injury, her smugness evaporated. She was arrested at her perfectly manicured home, her perp walk broadcast on the evening news. She eventually took a plea deal, agreeing to testify against the officers in exchange for a reduced sentence, but it still meant felony convictions, restitution, and the complete obliteration of her reputation. She lost everything: her home, her position, and her standing in the community she claimed to love. The two officers were charged with criminal negligence and reckless endangerment. The older one, the one who had first drawn his weapon, was also charged with aggravated assault. At their trial, my testimony was calm, measured, and devastating. I described the sound of the bullets, the sight of my wife on the floor, the fight for my daughter's life in the NICU. I held up a tiny, preemie-sized diaper for the jury to see. The courtroom was silent. Both officers were convicted. They lost their badges, their pensions, and their freedom. The civil suit was settled for a substantial confidential sum, enough to ensure Sarah and Ilara would never want for anything, and to pay for the lifelong therapy we would all undoubtedly need. But the true victory, the real triumph, came months later. Sarah, after a long recovery, was finally strong again. Ilara, our little fighter, grew stronger every day, finally coming home from the hospital to a new house, far away from that cursed neighborhood. We had sold the property, the bullet hole in the nursery patched, but the memory forever scarred into its foundations. On the day we moved into our new home, a rustic cottage on a few acres of land with no HOA in sight, we planted a new hedge in the backyard, a yellow rose bush, for the paint, for the hope, for the life that almost wasn't. Sarah stood beside me, holding a thriving Ilara in her arms. The sun was warm on our faces, and for the first time in a long time, the air didn't feel heavy with threat. We had faced down the bullies, the corrupt, and the negligent. We had used the system that failed us to bring them to their knees. We had won. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Share your own stories of standing up to injustice in the comments below.